Hello, this is Virtuals the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. About 3 weeks ago, I made a video to demonstrate the strategy of opposite side castling and then launching a pawn storm. Yesterday, I played another game where I made use of this strategy to good effect. As I play and review a game, I often imagine what some of the moves represent. As per the title of the video, the poor opponent's king met his demise in the center of the board after losing his cocoon of defenders. Please enjoy! Let's start with the review. So chess.com's algorithm, I played pretty well, 84%, opponent somewhat less accuracy at about 71%. And as you can see, I made probably an overall larger number of good moves compared to the opponent. We started off, however, very equal, but then some advantages put me ahead, and I was able to win the match. Let's move on now to the analysis. So I played with the white pieces, and as usual, e4. Opponent played c6, and I have to admit, when they made the move, I was a bit tired. I actually thought they played the Sicilian. So against the Sicilian, I always play knight c3. So I played knight c3, and then I sort of recognized, oh, wait a minute, that's the Caro-Kann. That's not the Sicilian, because normally against the Caro-Kann, I actually play d4 as move 2, basically taking the center with both pawns. But, you know, this is interesting because apparently this is actually the main line. I did know that this was the main line, so I thought, okay, that's cool. So here I will now play d4, captures, and capture back with knight. That all makes sense. Knight f6. I thought about this, and then I sort of lost my nerve, and so I decided to play f3, which actually is not good as does knight captures knight. Opponent now plays bishop f5, and at this point I did lose my nerve, and I thought, better just capture it anyway. They're forced to damage their pawn structure. Surely this is okay for me. Yeah, pretty equal at the moment. Should have captured straight up. At this point, I decided to play g4. I thought, let's be aggressive. Already played the f3, so now play g4. Basically, obviously, I've sort of relinquished pretty much good sense in castling kingside. But I thought, you know, maybe they'll move the bishop here. And I thought if they move the bishop there, that are they trapping their bishop? I thought maybe they were. They did move it there, but apparently that's not that bad a move, actually. The advantage is definitely a little bit towards black at the moment. I'd play knight h3, so potential sort of attack here, I thought. Opponent plays bishop d6, and I now play bishop f4. So again, asking the question, I thought this, if they captured, I would capture back with the knight, and that again would be a good place for my knight. They short castles. I put an extra defender in terms of the queen, and they capture back with knight. And things are good. Opponent now moves queen b6, which is apparently a blunder. I think it's not terribly obvious that it is. I think their logic here is to attack that pawn on b2. But I was planning on long castling anyway, and so that protects it. Now also brings all my potential pieces onto the king side of the board, because I now want to launch a major attack on the king side, strip away these defenders, push these pawns forward. Opponent plays knight a6, so I suppose trying to move their pieces, queen and knight, to attack my queen side, but you know, they've sort of hemmed in their own pawns there. They probably do need to do a pawn storm to really make that attack work. So this was not the most accurate move according to Stockfish. Knight captures bishop, but thematically I wanted to whack any defenders on that side, and that was clearly a defender. Now here with check, forcing the king to the h8 square, and potentially now pushing those pawns should be good. So h4 +3, definitely in my advantage. Opponent plays knight b4. Again, relative inaccuracy. I suppose it opens up the square for the pawn, but you know, that's not really scary given that the bishop defends that square. So I asked the question, what are they going to do with their knight? But if you look at Stockfish, yeah, Stockfish just reckons I should just continue with the theme of pushing the pawns. Opponent now plays knight d5, and that's probably not a great square ultimately for their knight because it's 2 squares away from my queen, which is a diagonal moving piece, which means these square, well, that's also by the pawn. So these squares are all basically defended by me, which means the knight doesn't really have very many places to go. I now move bishop back to d3, thinking that, again, bringing an extra attacker here would probably could be good. a5, the opponent now is pushing a pawn. I push, maybe not the right pawn. I couldn't quite work out which way was best. I thought g5 was potentially okay. They continue with the a pawn march. I thought I'd better block that with a3. Opponent brings queen to b3. And I suppose it's a scary looking place, but they actually don't have anything. Everything here is defended. And if the queen goes here or here, it doesn't really achieve very much for them. So now I play h5 and they're in trouble because if they capture, bang. If they leave it, then that becomes pinned by my rook. So this is now looking very good for me and looks almost +9. Captures back with rook. They sort of threaten with a pawn, but of course that is pinned, which means I can now straight up capture with the bishop, stripping another pawn away from the defense. King's pretty much now forced to do the defending themselves. This rook is looking pretty, not really a defender around the king, unfortunately, not really a defender around the king. So here I decide to capture, get rid of another defender. Now I did see that came with check, but I didn't actually want to potentially open up that file for the rook. So apparently that was an equally good move, but mate in 8s, I can't see mate in 8s. I'm doing this more thematically. So now with check, pretty much king really only has one logical move, which is now to take that bishop. But now then I could have with the queen with check again and with X-ray defense of the rook. So king forced pretty much to move again, capturing my pawn. And so king has well and truly been dragged out of their little protective bit, dragged out of their castle. And now these pieces are all potentially in for the attack. So rook g1, and so pretty much a mate in 1 now. King forced to move into the square, and if you look at my pieces now, they're in the center of the board. This pawn defends those 2 squares. This pawn defends those 2 squares. Let's put those back. This rook potentially covers all of this file. This rook can cover all of this file, and the queen, of course, covers here basically, and of course the pawn is also covered by the queen. Basically, if I can give a check, king is dead, king is checkmate. And of course, I could checkmate now in 2 ways with either of those rook moves. I ended up moving the rook on g1 to g4 with checkmate, and king dragged out, executed in the middle of the board, their pieces hanging around, not being able to protect. So good game, GG. On move 9, my opponent made a decision to castle kingside, which was actually the best move according to Stockfish. At this point, I had already made 2 very committal pawn moves on that side, f3 and g4. So it became logical for me to castle queenside and to continue to push forward those pawns. In the end, my opponent's attempt to counterattack on my queenside with knight and queen was simply not fast or coordinated enough, and I was successful in the win. I hope you found this video interesting, and thanks for watching.